Okay, so I think we move on to bass. Bass guitar. Okay, so bass guitar, very simple actually. Didn't use any amps. Recorded DI. And then actually, what did I? Yeah, I did two things, sorry. So I've got this little, this awesome little box. It's called the Leal P-Split. And you plug your bass or your guitar in one end, and it basically does a perfect split of the signal. One I recorded as a DI straight into my interface. The second went through a channel strip. So it's a tube channel strip, SPL channel 1, with a bit of compression applied. And so basically what I have here is we've got bass pre, high and low. It's the same trick that I did with the toms really. I've got one going into a high bus, which is a high pass, and I've got one going into a bass low, which is a low pass. And they're exact same, they're duplicates. In the end, I didn't even use the high pass version. What I did instead is I took that DI signal and I used a different box, this box, a reasonably cheap reamp box. So it's called the Capo reamplification box. I can highly recommend it for the price. And then I basically reamped the DI signal into my Kemper. So I've got a Kemper guitar amplifier profiler, and I use that. So what we end up having in terms of the guitar signals is a mix of the preamp, which ends up constituting the entirety of the low end of the bass sound. And then I've got two amp sounds, which were reamped from the DI, which constitute the high aspect of the sound. Why do I talk about high and low? Because I found the best way to handle bass is to split it into high frequency and low frequency. Low frequency, you just want to like heavily compress. You want to manage, so you've got really tight, controlled low end. And then with the high end, you can be a bit more aggressive. You can put some distortion on there. You can start to bring up the presence. You can play around with it a bit more. So if we listen to the individual sources, let's change this. Let's put this into the master. So this is just the bass with nothing applied. So this is what went through the preamp. I don't have the DI anymore. I deleted it. But all you need to know is that I've got a mix of that and then these two amps. So I've got the Synmix SV. So Synmix is the guy who does the profiles. So I've got the SVT 05. I believe it's the Ampeg amp. Hello. Oh. I need to. What have I doing? Got drum soloed. Okay, here we go. So quite. This is going through bass high, so it's already high passed, remember? But I'm using it for that high end. So it's still quite a clean bass sound. And then I've got the Extreme 8, which I don't know what the original amp is for this actually, but again, it's through the Kemper and it's for a bit of distortion. And I thought that I dialed it in a bit here and there where I needed it, but it seems like I've just got it going the whole way. So you can hear it's got a bit more aggression, a bit more harmonic content on the high end. Those together create a really nice, I mean, I say it's the high end, but it's still got some richness to it, right? So let's talk about, so I'm throwing both of these into a bus called the bass high bus, right? So let's check out that bass high bus and see what I've got going on. here we go. So I've got quite a lot going on actually. I've got a bit of, so this is the high pass EQ that I've got, but I've also tamed quite a lot of the super high frequencies. Obviously with bass guitar, not a lot of stuff happening there, so it's just a bit of cleanup. Then I've got my favorite dynamic EQ. So I've got instances where the bass is being a bit prickly, peaking out in certain frequencies, and I've got this in place just to tame those frequencies. Most of the time it should be barely moving. It's not really being hit a lot, but there was a little click, maybe picks that out, tames it. Then I've got a console emulation. So I'm not sure what I've got going on here. I think a bit of compression. No compression. So just some EQ. So without EQ, with EQ, just cleans it up a bit. Then I've got two stages of, why do I prefer Nova over the other? The Nova is free. So it's a free dynamic EQ. So I highly recommend it. And it's pretty stable as well. I've never had any crashes or issues with it. So then we've got two stages of compression. We've got like an 1176, which is, if you know, quite a slow compressor. So what it's doing is it's kind of evening out the volume of the bass. And then after that, sorry, the other way around. It's a reasonably fast compressor, so it's picking out the peaks. And then I've got the 2A, which is basically acting as a leveler. It's kind of leveling the overall volume of the high end. So what my focus on here was just to have just an even, consistent bass sound the whole way through, because bass is one of those things that if it's not relatively even and consistent, especially in the context of a busy mix, it kind of dips in and out, and you want it to be present the whole time. And we can hear what that's doing actually. So we'll take off the compression. And we'll pop this on. So this is the one that's tackling the peaks. You can hear that the initial transient of the sound isn't sticking out as much. It's rounded the sound out a bit. And then we'll do the same again with the second. And that just kind of smooths everything out. I think it reduces the output by maybe a dB or so. So if we look at, it's currently minus 19. If we take it off, yeah. So it's about 3 or 4 dB that it's shaving off. And we can actually see it's barely touching the actual compression. It's like doing maybe half a dB, and it's actually the 76 that's probably, actually it's only really acting on the peaks. But the thing is, this is an analog emulation, right? So I wouldn't necessarily completely trust what I'm seeing. Just go by what you're hearing, right? The other thing to note is I've got this Q bias down a bit, so that takes some of the top edge off. So that's your high end sound, right? Let's talk about the low end sound. So it's this bass pre that's going into the bass low bus. So we've got the opposite of what we had on the high. So we've got a low pass and also cutting some really low potential nasty rumbles. We've got, again, TDR Nova. So this is keeping the low end in check when it gets too energetic. You can see there's a theme developing. The low end is about control. There's a compressor. So this is your 2A compressor, which is about smoothing things out. Again, control. Then we've got this BX subfilter. So this BX subfilter actually introduces some harmonic content around a specified frequency. So it might be interesting to listen to this actually, with and without. Copy, paste, Oh no, that won't work. Yeah, we'll just have to take it out and in. So this is without. You'll only be able to hear this on headphones. And this is with. Can you feel that warmth come through? Makes a massive difference. Without. With. And then together, you've got your bass sound. So you put your high and your low together. And then you've got those, the high and low, then rooted into what I call the bass bus. And then that's where you apply some final leveling compression to take your high and low signals and bring them together, like marry them together. So not a strong amount of compression. It's like a ratio of 1.9, not massive. Then we've got this awesome little tool, which can be quite frustrating to use actually because the levels just go crazy, but it adds some really nice analog saturation. And then finally, just again, a bit more low end cleanup. And then this is your final bass sound. So you can hear there's some nice high end, bit of string noise, not afraid of that. And then just that really nice warm low end. And actually one thing that I didn't mention is that I've got some of the high end going into the room reverb, which you might have heard earlier. So if we just solo the high, got a little bit coming to the room reverb, you can hear without, with, without, with. And there's actually a place where I utilize it a bit more. Let me see if I can find it. Bass, 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 bass bus, bass high, room verb, here. So it goes from being barely in to quite heavily in. You'll hear it kick in here. It just adds a bit of atmosphere to the bass. So that's bass. That's the bass done.